This week, King 5 magazine presents a special event and a lot of events that led up to it.
In the space of a minute and a half, the Seattle World's Fair today gained the highest recognition it has yet attained. A television audience estimated at upwards of 200 million persons.
And we'll look closely at a news event through the eyes of the people reporting it.
I don't know how anyone can simply train to be a reporter. It's not the same thing that you get in Journalism 1001 at all.
Hello, I'm Hal Calbum. Welcome to this special edition of King 5 magazine, a program with two purposes. Our first purpose is to tell you some stories, like we do every week. But this week, the stories are on us. We're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of the King Broadcasting Company and our role in the communications business. The occasion for turning the camera on the cameras, for giving you a different look at what you normally look at, is a special occasion for us here at King. And our second purpose in this half hour is to have you share that occasion with us. Follow me, and I'll tell you more about it. You see, there happens to be a party going on right here, right now. That explains the tuxedo. The party is to celebrate the dedication of a brand new broadcast facility and corporate headquarters here in Seattle. There are guests gathering from our community and from NBC in New York. Among them, NBC anchorman John Chancellor, who we'll talk with later. But right now, let's join the fun.
Of this facility from what you've seen?
Well, I feel very badly about it. I worked there when they were in this old furniture store, and they never fixed it up. It was awful. And then when I leave, they build this magnificent place. It really is beautiful.
Well, I think it really shows the commitment of King Broadcasting to broadcasting in the Seattle area and in the Pacific Northwest. And if you believe in local television, as I do, and the combination of a good network and a good local television station, this is the proof that it works.
Our new headquarters has been years in the planning, months in the building, and days getting ready for this evening. Isn't it fine? But it's still only a pile of bricks and boards designed to support the work of a lot of people. That's why we dedicate buildings instead of christening them like ships, so we people who work in them can take a moment to reflect on where we've been and where our work is taking us. And because our work is communications, and we depend on you for our livelihood, we feel especially compelled to make this private moment a little more public. This is a corporate headquarters for a company that is much more than King 5 Television. There are 4 King-owned television stations in the Northwest, radio stations as far removed as San Francisco and St. Louis, cable television companies spread all over California and a couple of other states. We've even grown our own Washington, D.C. News Bureau to highlight doings in the capital of special interest to our viewers and listeners. It's a growing network of communications facilities, and now it has a new home. Well, this old-timer next to me remembers when this place was just a converted furniture warehouse on Aurora Avenue, Gene Anderson.
Well, I have worked here 13 years. I started when I was 6 years old, of course, and we've seen a lot of changes in that time. One thing that's remained the same is the woman who started this all, Dorothy Bullitt, the woman we've come to honor tonight. She started this enterprise decades ago, and she broke ground for this building 30 months ago.
That looks like real good
background of the machinery and all that.
That's part of the brick house we have to be right. Rhododendron that's called the King of Shrubs. That's its official title. And it's very small, but so was Channel 5 once.
Radio was the Bullitt family's first broadcast investment. In 1947, the radio station broadcast from the Smith Tower in downtown Seattle with sports announcer Leo Lassen.
Ostrowski is ready to go into the batter's box.
And we have just time to tell you that this is Radio King, Seattle, King. Okay, Leo.
Here's Ostrowski with an infield single and 3 trips. He struck out on each side of it.
In 1948, Mrs. Bullitt bought an FM radio station and a television station. Her children had convinced her it was the coming thing. The first telecast was a Thanksgiving Day football game. No epic, of course, but everyone was still learning.
It was really very funny looking on a 7-inch set. Couldn't see the ball at all. Could hardly see the players.
Still, the Northwest audience was thrilled with this newfangled home entertainment. Many of King's early studio productions were children's programs.
Wanda, Wanda is my name. Oh, boys and girls, I'm glad you came.
Zero Doctor, Future Crocus, Hullabaloos above. That's a secret password that we use down at the club. Zero Doctor, Future Crocus, Hullabaloos a fan. Means now you are a member of King's TV Club with Dan and Bozo.
There were many chances to bring community events live into the living room with remote camera coverage. Whether in the studio or far afield, this was the unpredictably wonderful age of live television. Ruth Prinz as Wanda Wanda remembers one example.
Remember that?
Well, we had a story and we had about a lion and we had a live lioness on the program.
Little tight.
It was a misunderstanding about signals, you see. She wanted to be petted, and I didn't understand that. I thought she wanted lunch. The funniest part was...
Anchorman Charles Herring brought the Northwest its first news and information, local, national, and
Let's
international.
start with the assumption that in the news business, on television, no matter what else you might say about it, one thing, it never is dull, not for very long. And we'll take a case in point. Our first telecast of The World Today, that was our original news show, and it was seen at 6:45 in the evening. And it was the first live show, incidentally, news show west of Minneapolis or north of San Francisco. The first show was on September 17th of 1951, and within 3 days...
For several years, we were the only daily live newscast in the area.
Part of the Olympic Peninsula noticed a wisp of smoke trailing through the air.
What was, at that time, the worst crash in the history of aviation occurred at 6:30 that morning.
The takeoff was perfect on this historic first flight of an American jet transport.
These are shots we took during the night of that uprising.
In 1957, King offered live coverage of Senate hearings from Washington, D.C. The cross-country TV feed with Charles Herring reporting proved a stunning innovation. It attracted national attention. Sputnik, October '57. Tom Dargan from a hilltop in Portland, Oregon. He anchored a half-hour special on the Russian satellite.
This is the world's largest television lens, and we hope that it works for us tonight.
In the early 60s, another broadcast coup.
A television audience estimated at upwards of 200 million persons got a close-up look at the fair by way of the Telstar communication satellite. Today's effort represented days of preparation employing some 36 members of our staff and 2 full days of rehearsal.
King Broadcasting had become a regional broadcasting force, a group of TV and radio stations. Yet each station, King in Seattle, KGW in Portland, and KREM in Spokane, maintained a strong commitment to its own community.
Was one of a half-dozen
During the McCarthy era here in Seattle, King became a champion of civil liberties.
Caused by suspicion, planted in voters' minds in the name of anti-communism. King TV now tells the story in Suspect.
In the troubled 60s, King covered the struggle for civil rights.
He said, I'm afraid I couldn't show you a home. I said, why not? Well, he says, you know why. He says, you look intelligent. You know why I couldn't show you a home. I said, no, suppose you spell it out. Well, he says, because you're a Negro, and if I sold you a home or showed you a home, he says, I couldn't sell real estate on this island.
And in a documentary on Senator Wayne Morse, we demonstrated the role of dissent in a free society.
I happen to hold to the point of view that it isn't going to be too long before the American people, as a people, will repudiate our war in Southeast Asia.
That, of course, is good news to Hanoi, Senator.
34 years, thousands of broadcasts focusing on local, national, and international events.
A lot of changes in 34 years.
A lot of changes and a lot of stories, some of which we've missed, and some we're still learning how to cover.
And there's never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment is right. I remember when this old-timer covered a story about a treed raccoon.
Now, that was a slow news day, and you know what those are like. Unless our audience thinks we're taking ourselves too seriously, we're going to show them a couple of never dull moments, and then we'll be back.
I'm Andy Reynolds in Olympia, where this woman plans to organize the United States.
Why, doggone you, I never said no such a thing.
With where these things are going to hit when they're fired off.
Well, aren't we presupposing that we're having an environmental impact?
Welcome back to our celebration and assorted reflections on where we're at. And welcome to Mike James, 5 minutes off the news set and into his tuxedo.
Well, you learn to move fast in this business.
Now, television news is the most visible part of what we do here, but one of the things we're trying to tell our viewers tonight is how much goes on behind the scenes in this place.
Well, I'm always amazed, even when I stop and think about it, how many people it takes to put on a good news program. The hydroplane races, we have 150 people out there. You probably only see a half a dozen or so. Well, we thought you might enjoy tonight getting a little different view of the news.
From the King Northwest Network, from the nation's capital.
It is 5 o'clock, and King 5 News is going on the air. Most nights, everything goes smoothly. Viewers may get the impression that Gene Anderson and I make the show happen just by pushing a button. In fact, it takes dozens of technicians, writers, producers, and photographers. It also takes good reporters.
All right.
Hattie Kaufman is new to King 5, but by 11 o'clock last Monday morning, she had already completed one assignment and was on her way to another with photographer George Stark. This story concerns school discipline in Seattle. The district is designing uniform guidelines, and the public will have a say in any future decisions. By 11:15, Kaufman and Stark are at Meany Middle School.
This is an interesting job because I don't know what can prepare you for what you have to do. I don't know how anyone can simply train to be a reporter. It's not the same thing that you get in Journalism 1001 at all. Hattie Kaufman.
I'm Dick Dykstra, yes. Hi.
Today we're talking about a philosophy of discipline. I have a responsibility to try to grab that, translate it into a video, audio piece that people can see on a screen at home, and a responsibility to be objective, to get the various points into its story, all points, as many as could have an impact on their decision. Before we go out and talk to kids or talk to parents, I want to talk to you as a principal to see how you felt about district-wide discipline policies.
I favor them.
At the heart of the discipline issue are the students. So Hattie Kaufman and George Stark traipse the hallways in the classrooms, talking and listening to kids. How do they feel about suspension as a discipline tool? What about corporal punishment? Hattie will deliver the narration, but George's pictures will tell the story.
It's our story. It's unfortunate that reporters get the glamour, because the photographer, by the nature of television, we're looking at a screen, and he's looking at the screen. He's the one who's looking through the viewfinder. He's the one who has the little television image the whole time we're out on the story.
If you're going to introduce the problem, then we could probably use an exterior of the school to establish where we are, what we're going to talk about, and then bang the hallway stuff.
Then let's stay at Meany throughout.
And do a stand-up inside.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So back inside the door.
Kids are hams by nature, and this may not be the best time to do a stand-up. But Hattie Kaufman has an easy time with people and an easy time with the camera. It's the writing Hattie finds most demanding to boil down a complex issue into an interesting, understandable minute and a half on the air. She'll record her finished script, then it's down to the editing station, where she and George Stark will assemble the story's many parts. And Stark had better be a mighty fast editor. Upstairs in the control room, program producer Larry Callie and director John Mickish hammer out a few last-minute wrinkles.
Page 3, and he'll just read page 4.
2. We'll lead with page 2, right?
Yeah, page 2, right.
We're leading with page 2 tonight, folks. Page 2.
Downstairs, the editing process is winding down. Finally, it's time for Hattie's story.
School discipline. How do schools handle children who misbehave? The Seattle School District is proposing a discipline code. Hattie Kaufman visited one school this afternoon to see how one principal is tackling that problem.
Meany Junior High used to have a reputation as a rough school, but several years ago the school started its own discipline code. Discipline is strict here. Smoking is not permitted, nor are radios and tape players. No fighting.
News, of course, is much more than pressing buttons. It takes dozens of busy professionals, hundreds of busy hours to produce every single show. And even with our state-of-the-art technology, it's still really the people, like Hattie Kaufman, who make our programs work.
Parents can speak out on the new discipline rules tonight at a special public hearing, but it will be months before the new discipline regulations take effect.
Some of the pieces we do here end up in this post-production center. It's where the computer and the video screen are married to each other, and the result is all kinds of electronic effects, which can embellish a piece or make it clearer. Commercial production work is often done here. Special projects are assembled, and sometimes we just add a little electronic pizzazz. All it takes to make these magical machines work is some intelligent information being fed into them, and that, of course, is the human part. Before we talk to John Chancellor, a couple more of those human parts.
Take 1. This is the real stand-up close, take 2. The effect of the second year idea would be to take 3. Take 11.
Let's change the shot.
In a few minutes, we're going to be hearing from a distinguished journalist who anchors the NBC Nightly News, John Chancellor. So far this evening, we've seen a survey of our past, a slice of our present. Now, Enrique Cerna and I hope to learn a little bit about where this business is going from Mr. Chancellor.
Hal, John Chancellor has been with NBC News for more than 30 years, and he's covered stories all over this country and the world. This afternoon, I got a chance to sit down and talk with him before the party began. An important part of our job here at King is to serve the community. Who is your community at the network level, and do you feel that same sense of responsibility?
We feel an enormous sense of responsibility on a wide range of levels. One is that in an awful lot of places, we are the only way that people have of getting really serious news presented by serious and experienced journalists. And those are in towns, and this is not Seattle, but those are in many towns around the United States where they don't have a good newspaper, where they've got a cheap, monopolistic newspaper that just runs a lot of features. So I, having come from the newspaper business, feel very strongly about serving those communities. We also, I think, can provide them with things that they can't get from print. And I hope that people will read newspapers and magazines as much as they watch television news. But I think maybe my favorite or pet audience are the people who are stuck in towns with lousy newspapers.
When you anchor the nightly news, what is it that you're hoping to convey to the viewer?
Clarity, mainly. We really work our pants off on trying to make it as simple and understandable as possible. And it's getting more and more difficult as we get more economic news and more international news and more complicated news. It gets very difficult. Sometimes I will work for half an hour on writing the introduction to a piece so that the audience really does understand, with what we like to call limpid clarity, what that piece is all about.
What is your role as the anchorman?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose you're the typeface, somebody has said. You're the introducer. You're the character of the program. I am, in fact, the editor of this program. And so therefore I have a great deal to say about what goes into it. And I like that because then when I come on, I feel that it's my product. And I feel that I would like to say to people, we've worked all day. And here is the best of our judgment of what we can give to you.
We've seen many changes in television in the last decade. New technology has provided many changes, ability to go live, ability to do things in a much faster fashion. Is that making television better?
Better and worse. Want to do worse first? Going live, let's say there are plane crashes somewhere, and you have a live camera, and you rush out there, and within minutes you show a scene of the crash. You can't edit. You can't really do very much reporting about it. You've just got a camera there. That's not journalism, that's electronics. Journalism is editing, preparing something, putting it into context. So I don't think that's so good. What I think is wonderful are the new graphics and electronics that we have that enable us to present complicated stories, especially economic stories, and make a great deal more sense out of them. I started in 1970. We could not possibly have done with the 1970 technology what we're able to do now in terms of explaining to people what's going on in the economy.
Many of today's reporters are coming out of television. They are children of television and radio. They do not have newspaper backgrounds as many of the top correspondents like yourself. Is this good or bad for the business?
I don't want to make what I call an old geezer argument. An old geezer who started on newspapers and made his way into television. The fact is that people like Garrick Utley and John Hart are top-flight journalists, and I can name some at CBS and ABC as well, who never worked on newspapers at all. I'm confident that these people who really represent the wave of the future, Tom Brokaw, I think they're good journalists, and I think we can be content with them. Do I, at the same time, wish that they had gone through the kind of teaching that I got as a newspaper man, where you learn to write in a different way? Sure, I do. But the world changes, and I'm really quite content with these people.
You're going to be moving into a different role in the near future. You'll be moving out of the anchor chair into an analyst or a commentator role. What are you hoping to achieve with that role?
I'm hoping to explain a few things. I don't want it to be a vehicle for my own opinion. But the world has got so complicated that I think that somebody needs to do the job regularly and often on the nightly news of coming on and saying, hey, here's what's really going on. Or here's what this language means. Or when you hear these phrases used, that's what it means. So I think more than half of what I will be doing will not be commentary in what I might call the old-fashioned sense, but will be explaining in the new sense.
How much longer do you think you'll be in this business?
I don't know. You could say as long as they'll have me. I'm 54 years old. My legs haven't gone. I think I'll be in this business for a long time.
You've been happy with it so far?
Yeah, I have. It's a great experience to be an anchorman and to do all these things that anchormen get to do. And I mean, I flew to Jerusalem with Sadat. That's one of the great experiences of anybody's life. I got to report all these things, and before that I was a correspondent, a White House correspondent, a foreign correspondent. It's been a great life, and it's not over.
So, all that remains of our party is the reason we came, to dedicate this building and the company to the future. And finally, for the president of King Broadcasting Company, Ansel Payne, to honor its founder.
Mrs. Bullitt, for whom I've worked now for some 22 years, has always made our minds move rather than our flesh creep. Any business is obviously the shadow of its own leadership, and with her leadership, we have found that work is love made visible.
Well, the party's just about over, and I've got about 50 seconds to finish up King 5 magazine.
And stand by, everybody. Here comes Hal. Ready, chroma key. Ready, Hal. And take two. Cue.
Thanks for coming to our party. We hope you enjoyed our look at what goes on inside. Tomorrow morning, we start looking out at you again, business as usual. We appreciate you joining us for this special celebration and for King 5 magazine. See you next week.